some instructions on how to use the website. It tells us to just scroll. So it doesn't feel like we've actually come a very long way from the McDonald's site that gave us a holding page, a bit of a landing page, a loading page, and then presented us with some instructions. 13 seconds is an eternity for visiting a website. It's an absolute age. But there are good reasons why it takes so long to arrive at that. And in those 13 seconds, what's happening is it's pulling down about 11 megabytes of images, and it's doing that over a whopping 251 individual HTTP requests. And the interesting thing is that when you look at those HTTP requests, a vast majority of those, they're missing any kind of cache exploration information on the headers of those resources. So your browser can't recache those, so you're going to get those again next time. So it's pretty heavyweight stuff. And as you kind of scroll through, because remember the instructions told you to scroll, there's no navigation. As you scroll through that kind of rises, because it lazily loads in some additional resources, the next 4 megabytes of images to get you through there. And the number of HTTP requests rises to around 316 when I was logging in. And, car websites seem to have a bit of a history of doing very ambitious and exciting things and not always putting it off. I don't know if you've had the good fortune to ever visit Ling's Cars, but this is a case study of, let's say, a particular design aesthetic on the web. And so you would imagine that, bloody hell, look, you'd imagine that Ling's Cars probably doesn't maybe embrace the best of the web development approaches that there are. But contrasted to the initial 11 meg footprint of the last site, this comes in at a slim 4 megabytes of images. And yes, it's still got a crap load of HTTP requests, but 314 is actually 2 less than what we were expecting, or what we found with the Volkswagen site. So if we pop back in there and we follow the instructions, I imagine that a lot of you have seen this, because I think it certainly did the rounds when people were looking at it. And this is really cool. I mean, as you're scrolling down, there are all kinds of fantastic CSS3 transitions and all kinds of effects that are going on there. But these images, of course, rather than being sprited into one image for a single HTTP request, there's lots and lots of images. We know better than that now, right? We know how to do this stuff a little bit better to reduce the number of HTTP requests with all of the overheads there. There are lots of tools around for helping us build sprites and what have you. And as we navigate through here, we start seeing different kind of user interface paradigms, like the familiar carousel there, and the navigation updates in the primary navigation. And of course, this car, of course, it roars and it tweets because it's a modern thing, so it's got to have a Twitter integration. I can't help thinking that Jeff Goldblum had a little something to say about this. In fact, I think if you pressed him, he'd probably say that really is rather a lot of HTTP requests. I think that's in the direction. So we're in real danger here of being eaten by those dinosaurs. And of course, when all of this was being designed, I imagine, at the agency that put this together, there's probably someone exactly like me saying, no, we shouldn't build it in Flash. We definitely shouldn't build it in Flash. We want to build this one so we want it to go everywhere. So we're going to build it with what modern web technologies, with all of the cool things we can do in the browser. Right? This is exactly what leads us down this line if we don't do it properly. We can always argue that if we're going to use open web technologies and not use Flash, it's going to work on the iPhone. I've got a MacBook Pro over here with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I could cook a steak on it when I go on that website. It's not going to work particularly well on the iPhone. And in fact, if you go to beeple.de, what happens when you're on your laptop or not on a mobile device is it redirects you to the full experience, the one that we'll be looking at. If in fact you look at it on a mobile device, it redirects you instead to the reduced experience. And I have to be honest, the reduced experience on the iPhone is pretty nice. It's pretty nicely done. It's well designed, it looks beautiful, and it performs really well. But it kind of negates the fact if we're going to put one website onto the desktop and one website onto the mobile, it kind of makes you think, well, maybe the approach that we took for the website traditionally might not be the best after all. We just take, I don't want to just rail on this website for the entire time, but if we just look at it once again, as you're navigating by clicking the global navigation here, if you look really closely, there is a URI, there is an address for this stuff. So that makes me think, okay, great, well they are doing some there's some good principles at play here. You know, we're hijacking the links and we're just progressively enhancing them with the JavaScript when it's available. But you'll notice that as you navigate, the address bar doesn't change at all. So that's not discoverable for the user. No one can actually bookmark that. And that's exactly the kind of criticism we had of Flash in the past. Also, if you take the trouble to hit those addresses directly, if you actually capture the address and go and put it in your browser, you just redirect it here, it doesn't understand it. So it's just a real shame. The bit that we just saw as you scroll with the car moving, that elicited a completely different response from my same colleague who was telling me that I was a member of the anti-Flash mob. His response was, why don't the fucking wheels? And I think that illustrates the point really beautifully that he was someone who come from the design side, and I was someone who cared more heavily about the fundamentals of the web. And between us, we were both annoyed with this side, but for different reasons. So he was caring much more about the pixels than the web, and I was caring much more about the web than the pixels. And it feels like that we were both poorly served. And frankly, maybe that would have just been better off and better performing had it been in Flash. Okay, so I promise I'll move on from this site soon, but there's a standard thing that you kind of tend to do when you look at how well a site's been put together and how well it lives as a citizen of the web, and that's to look at it without JavaScript, right? So let's take a quick glance at it. And when you log in, you get the loading screen, but you get nothing else because there's no content here. This isn't a website. This is the endpoint for an application. JavaScript users aren't completely non-JavaScript users rather aren't completely left behind. You'll spot that they've used the no-script tag to vomit onto the page just a little line that says to you don't enable JavaScript. And that's a pretty nasty experience. That kind of leaves you feeling like there's nothing there at all. So what is the address of the content? How do you get to the content on this page? We've completely forgotten about the URI and the importance of the URI. And with the URIs are the building blocks of the web. They're what made the web a web of content. And so I worry a little bit that we're perhaps forgetting about how the web works. But I don't think that's it. I think we're just kind of seduced by the possible. And the fact that we can do all of these things has just made us want to do it more. You're probably thinking that I just don't really care about the exciting stuff, but I promise you that's not true. I'm as much of a magpie as anyone else when it comes to looking at exciting shizzle in the browser. But I just think you should be able to get the content of a web page by doing something simple. An obvious and kind of high-profile example of this that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but let's look at it again, is Twitter. Twitter have got a very stable stance on this. They say Twitter.com isn't a website, except, of course, it is. That's what it looks like. And you go to this, and if you're authenticated as a user, you get your content. It's an offering on the web. But Twitter are kind of sensible, and they say, well, Twitter isn't a website, Twitter's a platform, and everything uses the Twitter API. And there are obviously good reasons for doing that. And the website that we know, actually, they refer to it even as the Twitter web client. They're adamant to kind of not talk about it as a website. So let's do the standard thing, let's take a look at this without JavaScript, because hopefully things have been built with a progressive enhancement kind of approach to leave nobody behind. And we're back to this experience again. It's kind of a lonely lost experience of an empty container. The argument that you often hear when you say, well, let's look at it without JavaScript is, well, nobody is experiencing it without JavaScript at the moment. Everyone has JavaScript enabled. And that's not true. There are lots of situations and lots of devices that don't understand the logic they've got to go through to parse the content of JavaScript. And also, what about the contract of the URI? What about the fact that there's meant to be content at the end of this? This isn't an app store, this is the web. And so really the experience you get in here is, well, that content's just not known at this address. Now, Twitter made use of this, right? The hashtag or the shebang pattern. Don't judge me for putting Ricky Martin on the screen. This is enabling me to play degrees of Simon Willison. I managed to navigate from Simon Willison to Ricky Martin in just 61 slides. So no matter how many exciting things you hear from the other speakers today, no one else, I imagine, is going to have done that. So I would imagine. Okay. But why use the hashtag? Why use it? Well, it started off using just the hash, right? because the hash is really useful for JavaScript developers to use. You know, we could read it and we could set it using window.location.hash. Doing so enabled us to update the URI without refreshing the page, which meant that we could do all kinds of client-side routing and client-side processing. And you can see why Twitter, for instance, would want to do that, because it means they can offset some of the heavy lifting they've got to do and just offer just a single API. And of course, the other thing that it means that you get is you get access to the history navigation. You know, you enable this back button, which is so precious and is one of the things that we often criticise Flash for not being able to do. And so Google took that, and since the hash has a meaning, it's intended to be a location within that page. They wanted to really formalise that and make sure that they could use it as a pattern that they could use to get at that hidden content, the content that wasn't on the web, content that you had to get through by doing some JavaScript processing and making additional requests to an API or what have you. So they kind of codified this as the hash bang and created this project for the Google Ajax crawling. And you can get to this and read about it and find out how you should behave on a security system for Google doing this kind of stuff. But it kind of makes me worry a little bit because the content there is hard to get at. So what does it take now to crawl the web? You know, how many technologies and what does it take to actually write a good spider and a good Google bot of your own these days? Because the bar is just raised so high. But you know, this kind of interface shizzle that these kind of practices enable, the kind of client-side activities, those don't have to break the URI anymore. I think a really good example for this is what happens on GitHub. Is there anyone who works at GitHub? Okay, well if there was, I'd probably give you an inappropriately long hug, because I think that GitHub is just a wonderful resource. I think that fantastic work is done there. And you're all probably very familiar with GitHub and what a project page looks like. And on this particular example, and we'll come back to this project in a second, but the code view down at the bottom, they started doing something which I thought was kind of interesting. And it's something that was possible for a long time, but they resisted until they could do it properly. And that is when you navigate through the code view, you've all seen it, instead of doing an entire page refresh, it just uses a bit of Ajax, goes off and asynchronously grabs some content, pulls it into the DOM, and then uses a CSS3 transition to kind of give you that nice kind of continuous and kind of easy experience through the code. And that's been possible for a while, and lots of people could have done similar things. But what I really like is the fact that they kind of resisted doing that until they could also take care of the important thing at the top. So as you're navigating through the bottom, it's updating the URI properly, and it's updating this in a way that isn't breaking the web, and it's not using any hacks that we just had to kind of make do with, like the shebang. And what they're doing here, of course, is they're using the history API from HTML5, and that is actually just a JavaScript API for the browser. And this is the only bit of code I'm going to show today, because this is more really about the why and the how. So, it's fairly simple what they're doing here. I mean, just using a bit of jQuery, they're listening for the click lengths of the tags in their slider element, and then they're calling push data on the history object, pushing into there, passing into there an object that describes the path, another parameter which is not supported by many browsers, which is a title for that page, which you can just pass in an empty string, and then the URI that navigates through, and then they just carry on. That updates the address bar for them and injects that into the history objects of the browser, and they can carry on with their Ajax request to update the UI. Now, at the other side of the coin, they're also kind of listening for the pop state event, which is what's triggered by using the navigation buttons, and they're intercepting that and they're updating their UI accordingly. And this kind of routing and this kind of processing is very fashionable and very useful in single-page applications, and kind of applications that are delivered over the web that are kind of self-contained single-page apps. And it's really worth taking the care to look after the URI, even in those conditions. And there are some really helpful helper libraries to do that. And Levi Roots is the one that we're actually just looking at a second ago. It's by Paul Killen from Google. This is a really lovely little project, and it's tiny, you know, it's like a 2K JavaScript. It's like a 2K JavaScript library, and it's really unobtrusively implemented, so you don't have to mess with the XML. You just drop this in, and then you can use a method of progressive enhancement for listening for the pop state in the browser, and for programmatically, you know, updating your UI based on what's being navigated through using the navigate buttons. And so, you know, it kind of leads me on to the importance of demos and developer tools. I'm starting to run a little short time. But this, of course, is a really important piece of the puzzle. There are I think we probably all cobbled together some little kind of demonstration sites to demonstrate a really kind of exciting thing that we've discovered. And this is a classic. Adobe are jumping very much in on the HTML5 umbrella bandwagon. And this site, the Expressive Web, shows off all kinds of CSS animations, CSS3 animations, and you can control it, make this guy jump really high and do all kinds of fun bits and pieces. But this is also falling a little bit short because, again, it's just a demo site. But we do the classic thing of turning off JavaScript and taking a little look at it, and the Expressive Web suddenly feels a little bit less expressive. Again, this is just a container. And then you'll also notice that you can barely see, I'm afraid, up the top there, but again, they're using the shebang to enable the kind of navigation through their environment that they want you to have. But if this is a site that's targeting modern browsers and modern techniques and HTML5, then they're also targeting browsers that have got access to the history API. So why aren't they making good use of that? And I think more examples on the web that are using this kind of pattern, we all draw from that, and we kind of think that is the way it's done as a result. And so, yes, this is just a demo, but I think Bruce Lawson put it really nicely when he said the biggest danger is when the demo mentality leaks into production websites. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I've been guilty of that myself in the past because, as I said, I like the shizzle as well. I like the exciting stuff in the browser. And, there's an example I recall from, again, like 4 years ago, where I was just tremendously smug with myself when, while on my commute on the train, I saw in Twitter that one of my colleagues had put together a really nice example of a slideshow. It goes off and grabs a load of content from Flickr, and it pulls it in, and it creates this amazing slideshow for you with all kinds of snazzy transitions and what have you. So I followed the link on my phone on the train, and it was a Flash application, so it was just an empty box. It didn't work for me. And so, I kind of smugly thought, well, I can cobble this together very easily with a bit of JavaScript, lean on jQuery a little bit, and just do this on the train. So I put this thing together, which is exactly what you'd expect. It's doing the same thing. You stick in a tag, and then it goes off to Flickr, and it pulls them back. It does it incredibly efficiently, by the way. It grabs everything it can, it just pulls it in, makes loads of requests, and then it starts rendering them onto this kind of display in using some simple kind of JavaScript and CSS animation techniques. That's what you all look like at the moment. And it pulls those things in. Disgraceful. And I was really pleased with myself because, yes, it ran on the iPhone, and I could demonstrate a particular point. And I was also smug because I was using this trick of updating the hash so that these things would be bookmarkable, so you could share this by the bookmark. But really, this kind of thing now is a demo that's out there, and people, not many people, but the point is still there, that people refer to it as, this is a way that you can do stuff, and people talk about it as, this is the right way to do things, and rather than going down the bad Flash route, we do the Open Web Standards route. And so that's, I think it's a little bit counterproductive sometimes to have these demos that aren't making the best use of the tools. And just kind of a final comment really on developer tools. Obviously, development tools are starting to really mature around helping us with building stuff for HTML5 and all of the stuff that lives under that umbrella. Adobe again are kind of getting in here, and open web folks rejoice because Edge is coming. And
the tools that are available to us there really help us create these kind of effects very, very easily. But I kind of worry that maybe that is also another example of just automating this for us, so that we don't really think about what we're doing and how we're looking after the web as the platform that we're sitting atop of. You know, I think we've all had experience in the past of when things have tools have helped us create something. And so really my message, sorry to be the wet blanket that's saying there's all this exciting stuff, be careful how you play with it. What I really think, what I want to say is, you must experiment and you must explore. But regardless of whether you're building a web application which is delivered over the web, or you're building a website, I think we really must take good care of the web, because it's what feeds us ultimately. And also you should chew with your mouth closed. The slides for this will be released under a Creative Commons license. I'll be tweeting later on where they are. Thanks to everyone who used their images on there. Also, there's a bunch of links on there for various resources that I've looked at. So thanks very much and enjoy the rest of the day.